Ladies and gentlemen, if I can get you in your seats, please. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the most important question that we usually ask ourselves. No, it's not what is the meaning of life. What is the secret to success? Our next speaker is a news anchor at KHQ, and she's going to help us discover that secret through forgiveness. About a year and a half ago, my squadron commander, Colonel Corsi, he took a handful of us out of the maintenance squadron on a tour of KHQ, and we got to see all the behind the scenes. We talked to the meteorologist, and one of the people we had talked to was our next speaker. And I'll tell you what, she is truly appreciative of what each and every one of us do day in and day out. So she's been lauded by Spokane Magazine 3 years running as the best news anchor. You can see her at 5 and 6 p.m. on KHQ. Ladies and gentlemen, the Emmy Award-winning Miss Stephanie Vigil.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your service. I have been out to Fairchild Air Force Base, done numerous stories throughout the years, and I tell you what, you guys make us proud. The Spokane community loves you, so my hat's off to you. Forgiveness. It's an easy word to say, but not always so easy to do. Forgiveness seems like a virtue fit perfectly for saints. But what if I told you that forgiveness isn't necessarily for the other person? Forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself. Forgiveness is like taking your emotional baggage and setting it aside, no longer carrying the weight that you really didn't need to hang on to for all those years. I personally did not learn how to truly forgive people until I was a little older, a little later in life. I realized that the people who were hurting me, saying things, maybe their actions, their inactions, or their words, were their words. I like to think of this saying, it's very simple. Hurt people hurt people. By not forgiving them, I was allowing them the power over me that they did not deserve. Some people have very forgiving hearts. Something happens to them, and right away they can forgive. And I truly admire that. I don't think I was that person. Maybe I am a little bit more today. You know, forgiveness isn't always a pat on the back. It's not a hug. You may never even hear the words, "I'm sorry." To tell you the truth, that person may no longer even be in your life. They may no longer even be alive. Forgiveness looks different for everyone. But for me, it was like taking off this heavy weight that had been bogging me down for so many years and setting it aside and letting things go. But I had to get some tools to do that, and it did take some time. We all have been hurt by somebody in here, every single one of us. We've lived long enough. Maybe your pain came later in life, maybe it came very early. Maybe you had a parent that constantly criticized you. You couldn't seem to do anything right. Maybe you were in love with somebody, true love, and then you come to find out that person had an affair on you or cheated on you, broke your heart. Maybe you had a secret you were just ready to unburden yourself with, and the only person you trusted was this one friend, and so you told that person your secret just to unload, and you found out your secret was no longer a secret. You know, there are lines being crossed all over the place, all the time now, especially through social media. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you here either know someone, maybe it's happened to you, your relative, your friend, who no longer talks because of something that was said or done over the internet? Show of hands. Me too. You know, I think of traumas like stab wounds. Some are small as a paper cut. Some are decent size, and some are gaping. And you feel like you're never going to heal from them. We all have pain. We all deal with it differently. But if you don't deal with your pain, a lot can happen. There can be anger, bitterness, resentment, even vengeance. I see it all the time. I've been in the television news industry for the past 24 years. Trust me when I tell you this. I have seen the worst of people. But I have also seen the best of people in the worst of times. There's one story that will stick with me to this day. It is the story of forgiveness in the face of sheer devastation. The Schrock family, 5 children, and the father, Jeffrey Schrock, were traveling along Highway 395 just north of Chewelah, going about their everyday life. They were going to meet their mom, actually, to run some errands and do some chores, and just traveling along, not paying any attention to what was going on in the opposite direction, because in the opposite direction was this wide grassy median and an embankment, and that's what separated the lanes, the opposite lanes on Highway 395. But in the opposite lane, traveling at a real high speed of rate, was a man by the name of Clifford Helm. Clifford Helm lost control of his vehicle, veered into that median, and traveled right into the path of the Schrock family's vehicle, killing all 5 of their children. Carmen, Jana, Karina, Gerald, and Craig, gone in the blink of an eye. I was just talking to the sheriff about this accident today. He told me that his deputies who responded never got over this scene. How do you go from having a family with noise and toys and joy to being completely dead silent in your home? I don't see how they did it. I couldn't have gotten out of bed. I wouldn't have gotten out of bed. I wouldn't have known where to begin. That story was one of the hardest stories to tell. But what came out of it was amazing to me. I could hardly believe what I was hearing when I realized that Mr. and Mrs. Schrock, Jeffrey and Caroline, forgave Clifford Helm. Some of you might be saying, there is just absolutely no way. But they did. They forgave them, even though they had to bury each of their children side by side. How do you forgive? That's just a tragedy, such a tragedy. But they found it in their hearts. And in an interview, Mr. Schrock said, it's not easy. It is not easy to forgive, but it's what the Bible teaches. You see, the Schrocks were Mennonites, and they leaned on their faith heavily, and they were going to need to do that at this time. But this picture speaks 1,000 words. This is Mrs. Schrock comforting Mr. Helm while he's recovering in the hospital. While she just laid her children to rest, she gave him the grace to go and forgive him. And it's amazing to me. To this day, they're friends. They grieved together. It's not that the Schrocks didn't have sadness and they weren't grieving and they didn't care. They loved their children with all of their hearts. But they were able to forgive this man because they didn't want the anger. They didn't want the bitterness or the vengeance. And so they worked together. They spent time together. They healed together. He had to go through the justice system. It might help to know he wasn't on drugs. He wasn't under the influence of alcohol, and he wasn't on his cell phone. So maybe that made it a little bit easier to forgive. He believes he just blacked out. There might have been a medical condition there, but he still had to go through the court system. Tell me that that is not the face of a grieving man. who would probably die with the guilt if he wasn't forgiven. This story is utterly amazing to me to this day. I called Mr. Schrock before I came here. I said, you know, we've never met, but I've always admired you and your wife. Doing what you did set such an example for me and my things that happened. It didn't matter. I mean, that was the worst thing that could possibly happen. And these wonderful people chose that. But you know, the greatest thing about it, 13 years later, the Schrocks have 2 children now. 2 children that they can openly love with their hearts. They don't have that angerness. They don't forget their children. They're new children now. They know their brothers and sisters who have gone before them. But they have happiness now. They have love, and they're able to move forward without that anger and bitterness in their hearts. You know, doing a little research for unforgiveness, I have learned that there are many health benefits to forgiving, and those that exercise it, because it's something that you have to do on your own time. Like, nobody can tell you, hey, you got to forgive that person. You have to do it when you can. Forgiveness is a process. Sometimes it takes longer than others to get there, but it is a process. And forgiveness brings a kind of peace that helps you go on in life, just like the Schrocks and the Helms. What you're thinking and feeling affects your body. And here are just a few examples of some of the health benefits of forgiveness. And I realized when I got a little bit older that I did start to feel a lot lighter. Things in my life just felt healthier. Healthier relationships, improved mental and heart health. You have less anxiety. You can sleep better at night. Less stress and hostility. Your blood pressure, and they've done research on this, is a lot lower. When you talk to people about the traumas that they have in their life and they haven't processed them, they have higher heart rates than those that have learned how to let it go. Fewer symptoms of depression and a stronger immune system. You know, I'll never pretend to know anybody's pain, and I can only speak for myself when I talk about forgiveness. But forgiveness for me didn't happen until I was in my later 30s. I was going through a difficult time. I was getting a divorce. And it was crazy because all these past traumas in my life came over me like a tidal wave. I wasn't just dealing with the pain of going through a divorce. I was dealing with things that were happening when I was a little kid. I know you might look at me as a lady on TV. And what I'm about to tell you, I've never really said out loud. My parents got divorced when I was 3 years old. I lived in an environment with physical and mental abuse. And when you live in an environment where you're called names that don't belong to you, you don't feel that way, you think they might be talking about somebody else, but you're not quite sure, it sticks. It sticks because I didn't have the mental capability to deal with it. And so I was hurt by a lot of words that were said. I suffered from abandonment, afraid that if you get too close, you might leave. I didn't know if I could trust you, so if I felt you were going to hurt me, I would leave you first. You know, there were lots of things that were going on in my life that I realized I didn't process. And so here I am, 30 years later, 35 years later, going through my own divorce. And coincidentally, maybe not, my boy was 3 years old. And if any of you have ever dealt with divorce, maybe with your own family members, maybe yourself, it is painful. There is no winner when it comes to divorce. You know, your families are just torn apart. Your friends can't decide who they want to hang out with. It's awful. And then the worst part of it is you see your children and they're crying. Their father or mother are no longer in the home. It is just a dark day. And I was thinking to myself, how do I even begin to pick up the pieces? If my past is my present and I'm moving forward in my life, how will my present look, I had to change. I needed tools to help me because I didn't get those tools when I was growing up. I do like to think of myself as a resilient person. I do know deep inside that I have value and worth. I think I gave credence to those words because they were people that I loved and trusted. But man, I got a lot of friends. I still hang out with the friends that I have since I was 12 years old, and they got my back like nobody else. It's amazing what friends and mentors and people that love you and trust you can do for your self-esteem. But I had to work through it. I had to prove, and that's what I feel like sometimes I am in the news industry because it garnered a lot of respect. And that was what I was hoping for and wanting, was respect, because if I give you respect, I would hope that you would give it back. And so I tried to get this lofty goal of being a news anchor, and like Sylvia said, I was that big when I wanted this, and it just stuck in my mind. And so anyway, I worked very hard, I think, to prove other people wrong. And I would go about getting promotions. I would do things that in the end, I wasn't saying, look at what I did, oh, this is great. I'd be like, screw you. Screw you. Hear me? I'm making it. I'm not that person you think I am. And you know what's really crazy is I am not alone in my thoughts. There are many people that achieve high levels of positions because they're using the words of the naysayers. I mean, think about athletes. Professional athletes are like, you know what? You said this, they did that, I grew up like this, I have this, I'm going to take all of that onto the football field, and I am going to show you. And they get to higher levels because they use that anger to move them forward. After a while, for me anyway, it wasn't feeling good. I did not feel good about constantly saying, screw you, let me show you. I mean, where's the gratitude here, right? Well, I love to bike. I'm a cyclist, and that was my therapy. My bike was more valuable to me than it was worth because I would get out there and I would hammer down 13 miles anytime I could get out there. I would get on my bike and I would ride. I'd do this loop called the Hangman Loop, and so it was 13 miles of hills and the whole bit. By the time I got done, I was just wiped out. I had no energy to be mad at anything, really. But I remember one day, honestly, like it was yesterday, I can remember exactly where I was. It was 1 mile away from my home. It's in the country, and I've already prayed on my bike, yelled on my bike, cried on my bike, screamed on my bike, but this was a day where I was just going to get it out. And so I am biking, and I look up, and I'm having this conversation with God, and I'm like, what? What? And it's just quiet. And I'm like, what do you want from me? Tell me. Tell me so I can do it, because I need to change. And then I was quiet. And I heard one word. Forgive. I want you to forgive, Stephanie. Do you know that made me madder? I'm just kidding. I wasn't angry. I had a lot of work to do from there. How do I forgive when I've used anger to propel myself to greater heights? I had to let it go. I had to let it go. I started reading. I started getting tools. Instead of that luggage, the baggage, the emotional baggage, I opened up a piece of luggage and I started putting tools in it. I started putting books in there. I read books on forgiveness. I tapped into my spiritual side that I cut off so I can stay angry. I started talking. You know, my girlfriend's a therapist, and I talked to her for hours and hours. How do I go about forgiving? And I started to feel better. I created boundaries that I never had as a child. And I started to realize, you know what? This feels really good. I was starting to enjoy myself. I needed to not hold grudges anymore. And I needed to realize that I needed to move forward. I had 2 boys to raise. These are my boys right here. Oh, hold on. Those are my boys right there. My boys are 19 and 24 years old. And when they were going through the time, they took it very hard. One of the things I wanted to tell you was one of the ways in which I learned how to forgive was by calling my ex-husband. I remember calling him and telling him, not that he was forgiven, I called him and told him to please try to forgive me. Try to forgive me for the words that I've used. Try to forgive me for my anger. Try to forgive me for no longer being able to do this because my guilt and my shame were getting the best of me. Once again, my boys, 19 and 23 years old. One graduated from Arizona State last year. The other is in San Diego going to school right now. Every year before they leave for school, I write them a letter. I write them a letter telling them how proud I am of them. Proud of them for moving forward in life. Proud of them for the things that they've gone through. I want the best for them. And I hope that that year will bring that, because I know it will bring growth. I send them with the letter, and I sent them with this poem that I would like to give to you today. It's called The Man in the Glass. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for the day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, or the lady. Never mind all the rest, for he or she is with you clear to the end, and you've passed your most difficult, dangerous test. If the man in the glass is your friend, you may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. I can tell you, I have found success in forgiveness. It is so much easier to love people with my whole heart and to realize that we are all just humans trying to do our best in life. Forgiveness isn't a virtue for saints only. Forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself. If you need those tools, find them. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Stephanie. Wow, what a powerful message. The story of the Schrock family is just it touches you, it really does. And when she talks about the Schrock's family and their resiliency to get through the hardships that they had to get through, that's kind of going about our theme today. And yes, we're here at the Lift event today, but what else is today? That's right, Wingman Day. And I heard Friday too, and you were right. But for us, the Air Force in the last few years has definitely pushed resiliency on us to get us through the hard times, get us through the increased mission, the low manning, the aging equipment, all this stuff. And the Air Force is doing everything they can to help push us through these hard times. And in order for us to be resilient, we need that social interaction. Now, think about your coworker. How often do you talk with your coworker? Not a coworker that's a friend, but just a random coworker. How often do you talk with him or her that it's not about work? Well, for us to have that social interaction, it's very critical for our mental and our physical health. And over the past, I did a study, and it was over the past 7 years we saw that there's been a steady decline in the social interaction. We lean on Facebook to have that interaction, and we just don't interact the way we used to about 10, 20 years ago. Our Our next speaker is the professor of leadership psychology for Air University Leadership Institute. Now, everybody don't flip out here, but she's one that leverages her knowledge in all the social sciences of all of our PME and all of our professional development. So, without further ado, Dr. Mary Bartlett.
I'm fascinated with the suicidal mind, anywhere from passing ideation to imminent danger. And one of the things I've learned in my experience working with people over the years is that there tends to be a common theme among their suicidal thinking, and it's one of disconnectedness, disconnecting from themselves, from society, from their family, and from their friends. And I want to spend some time with you this morning talking to you about the importance of connection and how important it is to leaders to build connections among those that they are serving. Now, when I say connection, what I mean is simply a link between two people. This isn't just an academic exercise for me. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart that I've been studying for more than 15 years. I'm actually a suicidologist because I studied the suicidal brain, and it's taken me on a long journey. It's one that started actually when I was quite young. When I was a little girl and I would play with my toys, I would actually take them and put them into two different groups. The two different scenarios. One was they were either students in a classroom and I was a teacher, or they were clients coming to see me and I was the counselor. I knew at that very early age that I was destined to serve people. And that desire continued to grow in me as I aged. Fast forward to me attending the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I was the youngest of 4 children, and I was the first and only to attend college. And that was very exciting to me, and I'll never forget the very visceral feeling that I had when I stepped on the I felt as if I had arrived. I was finally at the place I was meant to be. I didn't quite know what I was going to study yet, but I was starting the process, and that was all that mattered. Well, I was on the 5-year plan, because I knew that at year 4, I wasn't ready to graduate. I knew that after I graduated, I would have to do a lot of adulting, and I wasn't ready for the adulting. So in what would have been my last semester of my college years, getting my bachelor's degree, I had to take an elective class in social sciences to fill the remainder of the requirements for my social science portion of the degree. And I ended up taking a class called Family Communication. And of course, the gist of the class was teaching us how people communicate, and particularly how people communicate in families, and the dynamics of that. And it was right then and there that I decided I wanted to stay in college and I wanted to double major. I wanted to finish my major in mass communication because I was certain I was going to be the next Katie Couric of the United States. I was going to be Katie Couric. But the second thing I wanted to major in was the family communication. I wanted to learn about people. I wanted to learn how to connect people and understand how they communicate, and sometimes how they don't communicate and what danger that puts them in. Eventually, I earned my master's degree, and I landed my first job as a therapist. I was working at the Family Support Center for the Air Force back when it was called the Family Support Center. I was a family life skills consultant, and I did a lot of teaching and a lot of counseling. And I moved around from clinic to clinic after that, and I landed at a clinic that for a while needed me to serve as an interim clinical director. And I rose to the challenge, and I did that. And what I realized very quickly about myself and those I was leading is that there was a gap in what we learned. We didn't do suicide assessment very well. And I felt it was my obligation to learn a little bit more about that so I could teach them how to do it more effectively. So I could teach them how to do it more effectively. Oh, and then I finally earned my PhD, and I had fulfilled the childhood scenario of becoming both a clinical counselor and a teacher, teaching graduate school and counseling skills to those students. So I felt like I had fulfilled my scenario. I just forgot what I was going to say. And does not happen. It just happens. I wanted to point out that this feeling of disconnection isn't one that just happens for adults. It's one that happens for children as well. I remember a parent I had who brought her child into counseling with me, and he had behavioral problems in class, and she brought him in, and I had been seeing him for about 6 months, and she came in one day and she said, "You need to do something with him. He has threatened to kill himself 3 times this week." So I took him back into my office, and I sat down, and we started a little play therapy, and I said to him, "Hey, buddy, your mom tells me that you want to kill yourself. Tell me what's going on." Well, he shared his story, and it was one of great disconnection. He had his connections severed in several ways. The first thing he said is that his father had been deployed, and his father and him were very close together. Then he thought he was going to have Miss Newcomb for his first grade teacher, and he got a different teacher. And he thought his best friend was going to be in his class, and his best friend's father was in the service and had to PCS as well. And then to make matters worse, his brother, he was the youngest of 6 siblings, his brother, who was his protector, went away to college that term, and he had no one to protect him against his other siblings. But the worst part of it was his bunny rabbit had died, and he was very close to the bunny rabbit. And so I asked him, I said, if there was one thing that we could do to make you not want to kill yourself, what would it be? And he stood up and he put his hands on his hips and he said, well, the first thing we need to do is give my bunny rabbit a proper burial. And I'm thinking, where is the bunny rabbit? And he said, well, it's in a box in the back hall of the house. And I'm thinking, no wonder Mom is really ornery. She's got a rotting rabbit in the back of her house. So I went out and I brought the mom back in and I shared with her what the severed connections were and how important it was for him to have this. And I asked her if she would consider some sort of burial ceremony for the bunny rabbit. And she looked at me and she said, I don't have time for that kind of thing. It's like my brain split in half. And the first millisecond, I wanted to throat punch her right then and there. In the second moment, my wise, and I thought to myself, she's going through a lot of difficult things too. Her husband's deployed. She's struggling with losing her oldest son who probably helped her. And I needed to help her understand that not only could doing something like that build her connection with her son, but it would build his resilience and his fortitude. And it was really critical. What I've learned along this journey is that there are lots of different theories about that explain suicide and connection. And one of the most important was from Thomas Joyner. He developed a theory of suicide, and he explained that there are 3 components to suicide, that when a person evidences these 3 components, they are more likely to want to die by suicide. And the first is a sense of disconnection or not belonging. When a person feels as if they don't belong, they have less reason to want to live, less purpose, and less communication with those around them. They start to disconnect, just as other people have from society, from their friends, and from their loved ones. When you combine this with a sense of burdensomeness, a sense of either feeling like you're a burden or carrying deep burdens, and you combine it with a sense of fearlessness about death, when those 3 things combine, you create the perfect storm for the likelihood of a person to die by suicide. And this is really critical to understand because it explains the mind of a suicidal person. I have sat with hundreds of people who have expressed their profound pain, and they have said things like, I just don't have a purpose anymore. I feel very disconnected. I don't fit anywhere anymore. That's a sad story to hear. But it's interesting that in our modern culture, we have many, many authors that are writing about this sense of disconnection. One of them is Sebastian Junger, who wrote the book Tribe, and I'm sure many of you have read this book, but it's a wonderful book in which he describes the connection that occurs during times of crisis and combat. And he explains that service members returning from deployment lose that sense of closeness that they experience. And he suggests that sense of closeness is what might explain post-traumatic stress. And understanding the sense of connection isn't just about understanding suicide. It's about understanding other mental health conditions like depression and post-traumatic stress. He goes on in his book and explains story after story of people trying to connect during awful, scary times and how that brings us closer together. Think about it from 9/11. When 9/11 occurred, people came together. It was a horrific time, and we didn't know what was going to happen for our country, but people bonded to take care of each other. Or think about the hurricanes that went through the United States last year when thousands of homes were destroyed. People did extraordinary things to help each other. And that's really critical to know, that in times of crisis we come together. But why is it that when there isn't a crisis, we find it so challenging to come together? Another book that I recently read is by Mary Roach. She is a scientist that explains why things are done the way they're done. And in this book, Grunt, she describes how things happen in warfare and in combat. She explains how why we carry the gear that we carry, why you use the food that you use, why we need particular vehicle armor. And she talks with scientists, but mainly she talked with a lot of Marines and soldiers who explained their story and about how these things work in combat operations. And one of the things that was so interesting as I read this book is that it had a similar theme to Sebastian Junger. It was a sense of camaraderie and coming together in times of trial. This is really critical because, again, we need to foster this sense of connection, not just during times of trial, but in times of peace. The third book that I would offer to you is by Brené Brown. I'm sure some of you have read this, Daring Greatly. She actually studies shame and vulnerability. And she explains that in order for us to grow and thrive, we have to experience our sense of vulnerability. But oftentimes we'll do anything not to expose ourselves in our vulnerability because we don't want to visit our true self. We don't want to expose our true self. So we would rather disguise it and stay disconnected than to evidence who we really are and to face who we really are just by our own self-examination. She goes on to explain that in society, in leadership roles, we tend to dehumanize the work environment, and that we need to humanize it in order to foster innovation. And the one thing that can actually destroy innovation is disconnectedness. And she goes on to explain how leaders need to work to build that sense of connection. And it's critical to building a healthy, thriving organization. Now, it's not enough for me to tell you that connectedness is so important. I've got to tell you the techniques. I want you to leave here with tools to put in your skill box so that you know how to build connections. This is where you as leaders come in. This is where the rubber meets the road. Now, these might look like to do, but if they are, why do we not do them well? Some of you might do some of them, but as I roll through these six techniques, I want you to think about the things that you don't do well. And I'm going to move through these in framing these 6 techniques in a series of questions. And as I go through them, I want you to think about asking yourself these questions so that you can decide if you're doing it now in your leadership or if you're able to do it sometime in the future. The first is considering generational differences. What does your generation believe in? What does it hold valuable and close to you? What do you hold close to you in your generation? The way that millennials, Gen X's, Gen Y's, and centennials communicate is much different between the generations. And so it's important to know how another generation worked. What are their values? What do they place in terms of their needs? How will you know how to meet the needs of another generation if you don't understand them and know their story? Everyone has a story, and people like to share their story. I'm not very good with names, and the way that I remember people is through their story and their experience. Once they've shared their experience with me, I can remember their name, and that helps me on a more personal level get to know them. So understanding different generations and what their values are is really important to moving forward and building a good team. The second is fostering lasting and meaningful connections and interactions. So are you a passive leader or an assertive leader? Do you get involved in people's stories? Do you know their experiences? Do you encourage people to know the other people that they're working with? The third technique is expressing and finding ways to generate gratitude among those that you lead. Gratitude is really critical, and research continues to demonstrate that in showing gratitude, it builds a person's resilience. So how do you express gratitude? Do you encourage those that you're leading to increase their gratitude? And do you know the needs, again, of your people so that you know how they need gratitude expressed to them? Because it's very important to express gratitude in a way that impacts them from an affective domain. One of the other techniques is finding ways for teamwork. I once worked with a supervisor that understood the need for teamwork, but he wasn't very good at taking time out of the day to engage in these social interactions. He found that very difficult. So he tapped into my skill, which was finding ways for people to connect and interact. And what I would do is organize a monthly luncheon with the department, or I would make suggestions for things that we could do on Wingman Day or at other junctures to bring us together. And what we found is that every time we did that, we felt more cohesive as a team. We felt more pride in what we were doing, and there's something about breaking bread with another person when you get to see their true selves and learn a little bit more about them and discover their story. So what kinds of things are you doing to increase gratitude and to help those that you work with find ways to express gratitude to those around them? Develop teamwork. And then there's mentorship. Do you make sure that mentorship is in place? There's probably no one here that hasn't benefited from the gift of mentorship. Can you remember who your first mentor was? What were the kinds of things that he or she taught you? How did they link you to organizations and to other people? What kind of a mentor are you? How do you build mentorship? What did you learn about mentorship? And how are you encouraging others to become a mentor? Imagine if you and every person that you led mentored one airman. What kind of an Air Force this would be. It would be so much better Air Force. You know, we had the Wingman program long before it was a Wingman program. And if the Wingman program went away, we would still be wingmen. It's just about knowing how to take care of each other. And mentoring is a critical key to that. And the sixth technique that I would encourage leaders to work on is never underestimating their role in a person's life. You never know how crucial you are to another person, what value you add to their life, what difference you're going to make to them in a small gesture of gratitude. This entire theme reminds me of the military poet Rudyard Kipling, who wrote about a young recruit who wasn't very mature, and he didn't really understand about himself very well. But as he grew in his maturity, and he grew in a sense of teamwork, he moved away from a sense of feeling like he wanted to kill himself, and more into the soldier that he needed to become. It's important to understand that connection is crucial in every relationship that you have, and finding the ways to connect with that person is very important. I have sat with many, many hundreds, in fact, of people who are simply looking for a way to connect with themselves and connect with others to find purpose and meaning and reasons for living. Don't underestimate the value that you have in a person's life, because the smallest of gestures can build the connection that they may need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bartlett. All right, if you could all find your seats, please. Don't be scared. Don't be scared, LT. Okay, Team Fairchild, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to raffle off the first gift before our next speaker, and then after our next speaker, we're going to raffle off the final 3 gifts. So what we have here, Lieutenant Bauman has here, stack of leadership books. Where are my avid readers at? All right. So we have, let's see, we have emotional intelligence. There's been a lot of those classes going on lately. The loudest duct, that's a good one. Crucial conversations, crucial accountability, and lean in. Lean in. I just did the Greenbelt course, and fantastic. So if you all get your tickets out, we are looking for ticket number 152. All right, we have a winner. All right. What's your name?
Sean Morrison.
What was that?
Airman Sean Morrison.
All right. Where are you from?
Hinesville, Georgia.
In your unit?
92nd OSS.
OSS. All right. Congratulations. You got some homework this weekend. All right, for our next speaker, I need your guys' help with this. So I had this awesome introduction lined out, and nope, I got one even better. So it's always been her dream to get an Oprah-like welcome. Like, you guys are expecting free cars left and right. So I really need to y'all get up, Miss Kitara Johnson.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Stop. No, keep it going. I'm playing. Good. Is it still morning? Good morning, Team Fairchild. Oh, you all need to say good morning like you work in a high-risk job, and tomorrow might not be promised. Good morning. That's what I'm talking about. Is it okay if KT keeps it real? We have some amazing speakers this morning, and they gave you the tips and tools, so I'm going to tell you a couple of tricks about what to do when you get out. And some of this may be helpful while you're in. Is that okay? Because leadership, when you get out, you're used to following a format. You're used to following the leader. But when you get out, large companies are not looking for people who follow the leader. A little bit. They're looking for innovation, creativity, and talent. They're looking for people who step outside the box, people who will represent their organization in such a way that they say, yes, that person works for me. They represent our agency. A lot of the jobs that I've had didn't even exist when I was offered them. Why? Because KT keeps it real. So, if this is the leadership box, throw it away. But I want to tell you how it works. It started out with a story of a little girl named Kitara Sadawi. I don't know about you, but when I was little, we used to use pencils in schools, and people would get personalized pencils, and I couldn't have that because Kitara was not on that little list. And it was also not on a Huffy license plate. Katie. Karen. I'm like, no, Kitara was there. I felt left out. I remember growing up in the inner city of Chicago. My mother had 12 kids. Kanisha, Kitara, LaShawna, Jamie, Elizabeth, Crystal, James, Naomi, Stephen, Daniel, Tisha, Timothy, and Joseph. Put a beat on that, she had a rap song calling us down for dinner. My mom was one of those real spiritually deep people. So when she would get us ready for school in the morning, she would pray over us. And my mom just never had anything simple. And she would always have some inspiring quote that she would use. And I remember getting ready for school one day, and she said, Kitara, there's 3 types of people in the world. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. Which type of person are you? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just trying to go to school. I remember my mom telling us, she said, Kitara, Kitara, it's better to be a live coward than a dead hero. And my mom was like the Rice Krispie trees. She was like, you're talking, but what are you saying? I didn't know where that fit in. I didn't get it. A little later on, my mom, when she would pray for us getting ready to leave for school, I remember the fear in her eyes, and I'm like, why is she looking like that? But it was because on the south side of Chicago, walking to school was a dangerous, dangerous task. Because when Martin Luther King was assassinated, buildings were burned down because of the riots, and those empty lots stayed in place. The houses that were in there in the apartment buildings housed people that were strung out on drugs, and kids would disappear, literally. When I would walk to middle schools, there would be coagulated pools of blood on the ground because they only had enough time to remove the body and the blood remained. Can you think about being successful on the way to school if that that is the first view that you see on the way to read and do math. We didn't have a lot of money. It was times that there was no heat inside of our house, or the heat would get shut off. So I know what it feels like to be a rotisserie chicken. We had a kerosene heater, and you couldn't heat your whole body at the same time, so you had to like rotate a little bit. We had a sheet, and I would try to put it around me. And kids at school were just so mean. They were like, "You stink." And I'm like, why can't they just say stink? Why do they have to put stank on it? Yeah. And I didn't get it because I washed up, but apparently kerosene has a stench to it. Yeah. I was really smart. I had a double period math class. I did science, and I was really good at school. And my mom told me, she said, "Kitara, you can be anything in this life that you want to be." I was like, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Yeah." But when I looked at the neighborhood, it didn't reflect that. By the time I went to go to high school, it was a school called Luther South, and it was a private school. I really wanted to go there, but my mom didn't have the monies to pay for tuition to get out there every day. So that big hope and dream of getting out of the hood and living good just kind of diminished before my eyes. I had to go to Inglewood High School. And I don't know what it is about Inglewood, but it didn't matter what neighborhood, what state you go to, Inglewood is always in the ghetto. So I'm like, oh man. I remember freshman year started, 620 freshmen lined up, ready to go to school. I was one of them. Guess how many graduated? Oh girl, I wish. 114. And that was the statistics when I was in high school. I'm 40 years old today. It was tough with those type of statistics. And I was chased home by gang members every single day. I was born with a heart murmur, and the doctor said, "Kitara, your mom told my mother she'll never be able to run," and here I am. I'm jumping fences. I was low crawling before G.I. Joe. It had nothing on me. So after a while, I said, man, if I'm going to get chased home like this, I might as well join the track team. I mean, I was running every day. It's not like the gang members were like, "Let's check her medical records." No, you don't chase her. It could be drastic. But long story short, I won MVP of the track team. But the gangs, they didn't let up. Eventually, I heard that if you can't beat them, oh, you could say it. Joining was the worst idea ever. Join the gang. Within a short couple of months, and I grew up in church too, so it was really bad for my mom. She said, "I know you know better than that girl." I was living on the street, but she didn't understand I needed to get to school. And the only way I could get to school was to convince every gang member to go to school with me. I was like, we can't let the rival gang take over. We got to be there, man. Every class. Of course, I was way more convincing than that. I made it deep. I was a Martin Luther King deep in it. And I was a leader. Because my mother said, "Kitara, if you're a C student, be the best C student. If you're a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper, but whatever it is, be your best." So I'm like, I'm in a gang, I gotta get to the top. I gotta be the best. I'm no, seriously, that was my mentality back then. Before I know it, I was the first lady of the Black Disciple Street gang. I had girls, when I walked into school, they would part like the Red Sea. I thought I was somebody. I was the bone crusher of 59th. I was like 105 pounds soaking wet, but I believed it. I walked it, I talked it. And no shorter than a couple of months later, the gang members came to collect. I found myself having to do things and compromise my integrity and my moral courage. And I had to beat up a friend of mine, best friend, who was on the street since she was 12 years old because her mother had used drugs and left her on her own to fend for herself. She sold aspirin in the neighborhood instead of drugs, and it caused people to go away, their customers to go away. So I had to take care of Carol, and I said, "Stay away." All the girls got dressed, and we were all dressed alike, and it was one evening, we went outside, and they said, "Kitara, if you don't do this, the penalty is going to be double for you." So I'm like, man, I told this girl not to come out here. I go up, And I had to swing on her first, and I knew they had planned on cutting her face, so I got on top of her. And I was like acting like I was hitting her. I said, stay down. And she was like, KT, my heart don't pump no Kool-Aid, let me up. And all I could think was what my mom told me, girl, it's better to be a live coward than a dead hero. I thought fast. I yelled, Fred, which meant the police were coming. So everybody started running. And this is the moment that changed my life. They said, the police not coming, KT, we got back. By this time, she had picked up one of the broken bottles that were on the ground. And out of all the girls that were out there dressed alike, who did she stab? Me. And I remember this, so you can't see it here, but there's a nice gnarly cut right here. And I remember when the glass cut right there, the girls were taught to die from me. So when they went to pull her off, of course, the bottle gets stuck right here. And now there's blood spraying out of both sides of my face. And all I could think about is this really happening? So in that moment, I had to take off my shirt right on the street, put it around my neck. And just like the videos that you see in the movies, you know, like Boys in the Hood, I ran up to the gang member. I was like, hey, folks, give me a ride to the hospital. Because, you know, on TV, they like, Ray. My boy, get him in there, man, get him in there. No, that is not what happened. He looked at me. He was like, folks, you ain't going to be bleeding in my lack. And in that moment, I realized that my life wasn't as valuable as the interior of his car. I had to walk to the hospital. If you don't have bullet wounds, you're not able to be seen quickly inside of the hospital. So I was forced in a situation that I was literally dying. They called my mother up, and of course I wanted to be hard because I was too thug life. I was like, I don't need you. Don't stay up here. I don't need you. I'm good. Just go get me some peroxide, and I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to call you in the morning. And my mother's looking at me like, what? I said, no, I'm going to call you in the morning, seriously. So my mom was like, okay, Kitara, all right. And now my mother, I told you she's like a Baptist preacher, but my mom has this thing wrapped around her head, like a turban. She's got this long skirt on that does not match the top. And she's walking down there, Jesus, you see my daughter, Lord. And I'm like, Mom, can you please stop? No, seriously, stop doing that. We got to the gas station, and my mother didn't have any cash. She only had food stamps. So you know how long does it take? I had to go buy a bag of chips to get the change. And then she had to go in the store and buy a bag of chips and get the change. And then we had to ask somebody else to go in the store and get some change until we had enough money to buy the $3.82 bottle of peroxide. And when she got it, she said, Kitara, I don't want you to die. Please go back to the hospital. I have faith that when you walk in there, they're going to call your name. I was like, Mom, you know that's not going to happen. She said, no, you speak what you seek. Yes, they will. And I was like, all right, Mom, I'll give you a chance. So I walked down there, and I'm complaining the whole way, and she's, Jesus, I believe you're going to take care of my daughter, Lord. And I'm like, this is a long 3 blocks. We get to the hospital. I walk inside, and they say, Kitara McKinney. They pull me to the back. They close the little curtain. And in that moment, my head starts hurting. The adrenaline's gone. There's not a lot of blood dripping out of my neck anymore. My head is hurting. And all I'm thinking is, I left my son at my friend's house, and I don't have the courage to tell my mother. I'm also thinking that I never rode a horse before. I never left these city blocks. Is there more to life for me than this? It has to get better than this. And in that moment, I looked up and I prayed. I said, God, you give me a chance. Just let me live. I will tell everybody to do the right thing. I will be the leader. I will do this. I was making all type of promises, like the ones you make when you get drunk and you're on the toilet and you're like, I'm never going to do this again. And we all know how that works next year. Turn up on a Tuesday. But they brought me to Cook County Hospital, and I lived, as you can see today. And I got back and I started doing just that. I started telling young ladies they didn't have to do this type of thing. I started telling young men that they didn't have to be in a gang. I started being a leader, and the gang didn't like that. So they came to my house. They pulled me out of my home. They got a lot of male street gang members to crowd around me. They took my hands, and they said, put your hands on the fence. They gave him a bat, and they told him to beat my hands 3 times for love, life, and loyalty so that I remember to stay loyal and keep my mouth shut. And he did. And that's where these scars came from. And I remember my son was looking through the window. He was 18 months old. So the second time they hit my hand with the bat, I wasn't crying because I didn't want my son to think what was actually happening was happening. And they said, folks, she gangster. And I looked like, what? And then after that, they said, Kitara, do the handshake. And it was a big dent in my hand. And I, of course, said, bless you. Of course, I didn't say bless. It was another word. And they said, folks, hit her in the mouth for being disrespectful, which meant they had to punch me in the mouth. And in that moment, I faked a seizure. I really did. I jumped on the ground. I started foaming at the mouth. And they allowed me to go inside of the house. But something happened that day. I said, I can stay here and die. My mom didn't have money to get me out of the neighborhood. So I had to start transforming my thinking. I went back to school and they said, you're ambidextrous. I said, no, I'm not, I'm Kitara. They said, you could write with both hands. That's what we're trying to say. And she was so confident, I believed her. So I started writing with my left hand. They said, do your work. I graduated from high school and I went to pick up prom tickets. And when I went to pick up those prom tickets, guess what? There was a college there. Just so happens. I went to college and I was not doing very well. I went straight from the hood to college, so it was kind of tough. I was like, hey, let's do that dance, when you flip the script. And they wouldn't listen. And another girl was like, can we do a Sadie Hawkins dance? I was like, yeah, girl, that's it. And then my grades did not reflect my academics, my cognitive abilities. It was the way I spoke. So I changed my voice, and I learned to speak in this manner to be a professional. And my friend said, Kitara, you're not selling out when you do this. You're an effective communicator. And I said, really? So I started using this voice everywhere I went, and I started graduating from different programs and being called to speak. That's not my bias, that's yours. I went on to leave, serve in the Army for 5.5 years. I stand before you as an 80% disabled veteran, a woman who was debated at the United Nations, a woman who has started a youth program that served over 300 and something kids a month, volunteer-based at Northtown Mall, an author of a book. But that's nothing. I'm going to tell you what I learned. I learned, number one, is to find your passion. Whatever it is, look, what is the biggest problem facing the world today, and what can you personally do to change it? That's how you find your passion. And once you find that one thing that you want to change inside of the world, I want you to research it. Research both ends spectrums of the problem. Look it up. The next thing I want you to do is find a mentor, somebody who has walked a mile in your shoes. Why keep making mistakes when somebody else made them for you already? You don't have to continue to do that. Find a mentor. Me personally, I have quite a few. To this day, I still have mentors. The next thing I want you to do is express continual belief in your dream. I never thought I'd graduate from high school, but I stand before you with a master's degree that I earned right here on Fairchild Air Force Base, driving 100 miles a day with 3 children, passing them in between the community college in Spokane and living in Davenport, Washington. All by myself. The struggle was real. People didn't believe that I was supposed to be in the place that I was at. They said, she's too young. Oh, she's too ghetto. She's too hood. She's too strong. She's too bold. She's too loud. So what? I'm convinced that everybody in the world is not going to like me, and I'm okay with that. As soon as I got that out of the way, I started soaring. But the next thing I want you to do after you do all those things, I want you to remove naysayers as close friends. People who say that you can't. Don't do this. You shouldn't. Because the same people, apostrophe T has stood between so many people and their destiny. An apostrophe T. The biggest mistake sometimes that we make is telling people our dreams and keeping those naysayers as close friends. Cut them off. You don't need anchors to sell. You don't. If you're selling on the sea of life and you got these haters, girl, why are you doing that? Come on, I want to see you. Girl, go ahead and you're going to be a model? Well, you're too old to be a model right now. A hand model? You don't need those people around you, naysayers. Remove them as close friends. The next thing that helped me, that might help you, is know that when you're wanting to do something big, know that it's always going to cost way more money than you have. And know that it's going to take a whole lot longer than the time that you expect it to take to make those things happen. But you have to have faith. I don't know what your belief system is, but whatever it is that you believe in, you have to believe that no matter what is happening, it's for your good. The next thing you have to do is you have to speak what you seek. Don't let people speak negativity into your life. And you don't speak negativity into your own life. Oh, they're about to go and pick senior airmen. I'm not going to have enough points by then. Well, if you say you won't, then you won't. Oh, my tech sergeant don't like the way I do this. Well, if you keep saying it, they won't. How about flipping the script? You know what? My senior airman is giving me an opportunity to shine. They're stretching my capacity for growth. It's all in how you see it. I remember I stopped saying, I'm broke. I don't got no money for that. Sometimes you can reach the pinnacle of your success, but the other mistake we make is allowing other people to define what success look like. Success is not measured in the amount of money you make. Success is not measured in a type of car that you drive. Success is measured in what makes you come alive. And I assure you, when you do that one thing that you're passionate about, that one thing that you love, trust me when I say you will make it to the top. People will seek you out. Like, oh my goodness, you clean those streets so well. Would you mind doing a webinar? And next thing you know, you're nationally doing this thing. And it could have been a task that was trivial to other people, but to you is what you love. Do what you love. Do what you're passionate about. When I speak, you can hear the passion inside of my voice. I found out I could have gotten so many jobs, but you know what I decided to do? I now work at a behavioral health organization for children with acute mental illness, with extreme trauma. And I share my story with those children. And I like to say now that I am a professional gold digger. They call it chief development officer, but I fundraise and I go and I tell people about the work that the 171 people in our agency do. I talk about the people who work there for 42 years, working with some of the kids that are hard to love, that you sometimes may never see a return on your investment. That's what I do. And it gives me great joy because every day I go home, I know I made a difference. Every day. And I'm telling you, folks, money cannot buy purpose. Some people say money can't buy happiness, but it can get you close. No, but and once you understand that and you start speaking what you seek in life, when you start speaking what is to be so, how many people talk to yourself? Oh, yes, I talk to myself. I get up in the morning, I'm saying, hey, I woke up like this. Not really. I picked my hair. I shook it out, took it off the stand, put it on. I was like, nah, this ain't going to work. This ain't going to work. I need to be draping today when I go out there. I want that whip action. I really do have a second hat in my bag, but just in case it didn't work. But you dictate what happens in your life by speaking what is to be so. I tell myself in the morning, today you're going to walk on the water. You're going to make 3 contacts. 3 of these contacts are going to provide $5,000. One of them are going to do this, and you're going to make 7 partnerships. Every time I don't do that, it doesn't happen. But you think about that. Speak what you seek. Express continual belief in your dream. Know that it's going to take more money than you might have. Know that it's going to take longer than you expect it to take. And get your degree while you are in. Because when you come out, I don't care how many people you let, it means absolutely nothing without that piece of paper, unless you're some entrepreneur that came up with a great idea or an amazing YouTube channel. But if you don't have that winning personality, I suggest you go get that piece of paper, because you will have to start over in the real world. I had to do it. I was leading soldiers as a sergeant, and then came out, and I said, oh, I did this. And they're like, what is your formal education? I was like, ooh, got to go get that. So I did. And every time I got one degree, my teachers told me to get another. And so with that being said, never, ever get up. Thank you for listening. My name is Kitara Johnson.
Wow. How do I follow that? Can we get another round of applause for Miss Johnson, please? So now, what we're going to do is we're going to raffle off our 3 gifts that we have. Our first gift, are you ready, LT? All right. So what we have are 2 wireless speakers and a tactical backpack with the Air Force logo on it. Go Air Force, right? All right. So first, So first, it's going to be the tactical backpack. So your ticket number 268. $268 going once. 268 going twice. All right. All right. Ticket 451. All right. You have 451?
Sure do.
All right. What's your name, sir?
John Fisher,
And what unit are you with?
22nd,
And where are you from?
Spokane.
Are you going to use that tactical? Yeah, I'm going to. All right. Hometown guy's going to go on some hikes. Give him a round of applause, everybody. This is our next gift. All right, so this is a wireless speaker. If I could get ticket number 300. Ticket 300 going once. Going twice. And it's gone. All right, ticket 251. You have to dance before. No, I'm kidding. What's your name, ma'am?
Sarah Washington.
And where are you from?
Newport News, Virginia.
And what unit are you with?
MXS.
the maintenance squadron. Huh? All right. And we got one more of those wireless speakers. We have ticket number 269. Do we have 269 in the house? Going once, going twice, and it's gone. I'm glad we have backups. All right, next ticket. 301. All right. What about 329? Are they here? All right. All right, what's your name?
My name is Ruby Bennett.
Ruby Bennett. And what unit are you from?
FSS.
And where are you from?
I'm from Phoenix, Arizona.
Are you enjoying the show today?
Yes, I loved it. I loved it very much. Yep.
All right. Well, it's not over yet. Please enjoy your wireless speaker. Congrats. Right, for our last speaker today, I'm truly excited about this last speaker. If you haven't looked him up on YouTube, I highly suggest you do it. Absolutely phenomenal speaker. Brings a lot of excitement, a lot of motivational techniques. Being a maintainer, I can definitely relate to his speaking style. He excites and intrigues audiences everywhere he goes. He's been seen. He's been interviewed on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. And he was lauded as Incorporated Magazine's top 100 leadership style speakers. So today, he's going to help us find what's most powerful about us. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dov Baron. Woo! 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 Woo!
Okay. I'm going to take Claude's lead. I want a photograph of you all, but I need more activity. I don't want you to just sit there. Ready? So we do a photograph. I need you all to just make a big noise. Put your arms in the air. You ready? Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Woo! Woo! Fantastic. All right. Hey, before I even start, how have the speakers been? Amazing, huh? Amazing. And I've got to follow that. Good luck. I don't have the hair. I don't have the heels. I don't have any of those things. I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to have to do my best. And I'll tell you before I even start that I've been speaking for 34 years, and I still get nervous. When I was coming up, I could feel the anxiety. I could feel my heart beating like crazy. I mean, things can go wrong. Sorry, there's a thread. What is going on? What is this? Okay, we'll get that later. Imagine yourself in a famous art gallery. As you look around at all the beautiful pieces of art that are on the walls, you suddenly notice this magnificent tapestry. It catches your eye. You stand there looking at it from a distance and think, wow, it seems to have every color of the rainbow woven into the entire piece. It's magnificent. So you walk over to take a closer look, and you stand there in awe of its beauty, of its complexity, and yet its simplicity. And below you see a little sign, and it says the title of the piece, The title of the piece is One Red Thread. One red thread. It goes on to explain that the tapestry represents the life, and that all of our lives are multiple threads that are all strung together. And it goes on to explain that inside this tapestry is a single red thread that binds every other piece together. It's there from the very beginning to the very end. And the artist goes on to challenge us to find our own one red thread. Because the artist explains that your one red thread of your life is the thing that will give you something more valuable than happiness. It will bring you fulfillment. It will give you the very thing that you've been looking for. But you might be thinking, why would I put all that time and energy and effort into trying to find my purpose? I mean, let's face it. There are kids to get to school, there's bills to pay, deadlines to meet, and yeah, you got to get rid of that extra 5 pounds, right? All been there. And let's face it, after a hard day's work, most of us just want to get home, have a little dinner, hang out with some friends and family, maybe put up your feet, binge watch some Netflix, go to bed, get up in the morning and start the pattern again. And the truth is that that's what will happen for most people. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, hoping, praying it was going to get better. But it probably won't. But there are a few of you. And you know who you are. You see, when most people see that sign, that challenge underneath what the artist wrote about going to find your purpose because it will bring you purpose, bring you fulfillment, most people think, yeah, that's very interesting, kind of cool, but nothing to do with me or my life. But those of you who are in those few people, you might be finding yourself like this, and you can just recognize that this is yourself. You don't have to put your hand up or anything, but you might be finding, because you might be sitting next to somebody who you'll see why in a moment. You finding yourself kind of irritated and frustrated by a lot of the people that you're around. They might be friends, they might be family, might be co-workers, but you get kind of frustrated and irritated with them because they have the same conversation over and over again. Yeah, I see some subtle nods. They seem to be complaining incessantly. And you might find yourself kind of withdrawing from them. You might find yourself emotionally, psychologically stepping back, making their external conversations the background noise for a more important conversation that's going on inside of you about the meaning of your own life. You begin to question. Now, at that point, you might be thinking, I need to find better people. And you might. That might be true. But what I want to challenge you to consider is that maybe that is your one red thread, your purpose calling out to you, reminding you to come home to the deeper part of who you are. I'll tell you something very interesting about purpose, is that when I was 7 years old, I was absolutely certain that I'd found my purpose. I was certain of it. How? Well, on a particular day, my dad, with bags in hand, was about to walk out of the door forever, and he suddenly turned, saw me, walked back towards me, crouched down, rubbed my hair, and said, I'm going. You're the man of the house now. Oh, thank you so much. Good parenting. Now, I don't know that it was an official job, but I certainly felt like I had lots of work to do. I felt like it was my job to take care of my siblings. It was my job to make sure the house was clean. It was my job to be my mom's sounding board and my mom's confidant. And by the time I got to 10 years old, I was a completely stressed out, exhausted kid. There's this picture of me at 10 years old, and I've got this big crevice down the middle of my forehead, like looking like this really stressed out kid. And so at that age, I was going to say interested, but that would be a gross understatement. I became obsessed with finding the meaning of life. Now, I did say, you didn't hear it wrong, I did say I was 10, and I did say I was obsessed with finding the meaning of life. What I didn't say was, I was a really weird kid. I was just a bit wacky. I was obsessed with finding the meaning of life. And I would incessantly ask anybody who would listen, I would ask them about it. And it didn't take long before the tables turned. And I found adults asking me for solutions to their grown-up problems. And that continued on into my adult life. And as weird and uncomfortable as it felt for people to ask me those questions, something about it felt very natural in answering. See, like some of the other speakers, it's really interesting to me that all the speakers, we've all talked about the same thing in different threads. And I grew up in a ghetto. And I grew up around all that violence and crime and all those kinds of things. And yet, I would notice that people were doing the same things that just didn't work over and over again. Remember, it's all on a loop. Day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade. I noticed that. So I began to ask these questions, and then people were asking me for answers. It felt really uncomfortable. But I began to think, maybe this is my purpose in life, because it felt so good to be helping people. So to be certain in my search for meaningful life, to have certainty if this was in fact my purpose, I began to travel the world. I began to travel the world to study with different spiritual masters from around the world. I studied a variety of faiths, and even in my early 20s, I became a psychotherapist. Forgive us. There are a few of us in the crowd. We know that we are weird creatures, but I became a therapist. But the truth of it was that it didn't feel right to me. That therapeutic model fell out of alignment with the truth of what I believed. You see, at a deep level, I've always believed that we're born whole, complete, and miraculous. And that nobody, no circumstance could take that away from us. And so I began to write books, create workshops. I was on TV, radio, newspaper. It was all happening for me. It was very exciting. I became a machine. For 2 consecutive years, 7 days a week, I worked on it, and I just loved it. I loved the success. I loved the work. And I didn't mind the attention. A little bit. A little bit. And I just figured I was just going to reach for higher and higher and higher levels of success in my life. And then, what are you doing? Why are you holding me down? Why are we going so fast? I feel sick. Please, the sirens are so loud. Stop it. Oh my God. I don't understand. Why are you doing this to me? Where are we going? You see, I was an adrenaline junkie. On a particularly beautiful sunny day in June 1990, I was free climbing with a friend of mine. Free climbing is climbing without ropes, in case anybody doesn't know. It's a sport for the moderately insane. And I was way beyond moderate. And with the warm sun on my back and the breeze across my face and the ragged rocks against my calloused hands, I reached for a rock that dislodged a bigger rock that hit me in the face and sent me hurtling down onto the boulders below, where I landed on my face. Bam! My body was shattered. I fell 120 feet. That's equivalent to 12 stories. But something more important happened that day. I fell 120 feet from a self-imposed pedestal and landed on my ego. I hit a hard reset of deep, dark depression, hopelessness, anger, and even rage. I was furious. How could this happen to me? I was being divinely guided. I was on purpose. How could this possibly be happening? I was so pissed off all the time. I would walk down the street, and if the street was crowded and people were in front of me, I would do this. I would boot them in that ankle and walk this way. Like I was a pissed off individual. I found myself waking up in the night like this. I was so angry, so frustrated. How could this happen to me? I had no idea how it could happen to me. And I don't have time to go into all the details of what happened and how I recovered. But one thing was for sure, I did realize I couldn't get out of it alone. And you've heard that message here consistently. No one does it alone. I needed a mentor. I needed a guide. I needed somebody who had walked in those shoes who could help me come back. And I had many, as you've heard that too as well. And now today, that's what I do. I help people to find their one red thread. I help organizations to find the one red thread of their organization. It's an honor and a pleasure to do that. But let's take that as a sidebar for a moment. And let's fast forward 6 years and multiple reconstructive surgeries after that event. And I just delivered a 5-day public seminar. And at the end of that seminar, this lovely lady walks up to me to very generously give her thanks. And she walks up and she says, "I'd like to thank you on behalf of my grandchildren." There were certainly no grandchildren at the event. And I must have looked really confused because there was no way in the world this lady was old enough to have grandchildren. So I said, "How many do you have?" Thinking, whoever your surgeon was, that's who I need. She says, "I don't have any yet. But what I now understand about finding my purpose, that means that when they show up, I'll be on purpose and I'll be able to add value to their lives." What's fascinating is before 1990 in that fall, that compliment would have fed my ego, would have made me feel really good about what I was doing. But in that moment, I felt humbled. I felt like she had given me far more than I'd given her. When you're on purpose, it isn't about the person who's in front of you. It's about impacting lives of people who will never know your name. It's about something far bigger, far greater than the direct impact that might feed your ego. It's about the ripples on the pond that will go out forever. So what was the difference? If it had fed my ego before and it didn't then, what was the difference? In that moment, I got it. When she said that to me, I got it. It hit me like a boulder to the head. That prior to the fall, I was looking for my purpose to make my life better. But after the fall, I got it that I am here to be in service of my purpose. It doesn't serve me, I serve it. That's actually what it's about. That recovery was long and it was brutal. And as I said, I won't go into the details of it. But the question is, do you have to fall on your head to find your purpose? Do you have to have something extraordinary happen to you? Do you have to be born extraordinary? Or can somebody born very ordinary go on to do extraordinary things? And the answer is yes. It's there for all of us. You may be familiar with a young lady by the name of Malala Yousafzai. She is the Nobel laureate who was shot in the head by the Taliban. And it might be easy for you to imagine that her purpose is to rebel against the radicals. But that's only a small portion of it, of what drives her. Think about somebody like, we've heard this person mentioned here today. Is Claude still here? No, she's not. Okay. Well, Gary Vaynerchuk. You familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk? I didn't see that before. Can you show of hands? If I can't see your armpit, it doesn't count. There you go. Thank you. Gary Vaynerchuk. For those of you familiar with him, you might, if you're not familiar with him, he is the modern face of marketing who doesn't mind dropping a few F-bombs or a couple of hundred of them. And you might imagine that Gary's purpose is to get enough wealth, get enough fame to become the owner of the New York Jets, because let's face it, the guy is absolutely everywhere. If you're into Gary Vaynerchuk, you see him everywhere, and he's always going on about how wonderful the New York Jets are. But if that's what you think his purpose is, you'd be missing so much of who he is. Our purpose is not about we think it's about being extraordinary. It's not. It's about being ordinary, but going out and doing something extraordinary in the world, driven by something within you that calls you to have that impact. So just for a moment, I want you to ask yourself, what is it that drives you? What is it that gets you up every single day? How do ordinary people go on to do extraordinary things? Ask yourself that. And now you might be thinking, well, why does it matter? Well, you might be aware that 70% of the workforce, actually more than 70% of the workforce, is going to the work every day disengaged. What does that mean? It means then they're physically there, but emotionally and mentally they're not there. If you're noticing that in yourself, pay attention. This may be your soul trying to wake you up. We know, according to the American Journal of Psychiatry, that major depression doubled in the years between 1991 and 2002. That's serious. And that there are more than 350 million severely depressed people in the world today. That's more than the population of the entire United States. Why is this? I believe that this data points to the fact that we are human beings. We need to find meaning. We're looking for the purpose of our lives. And when we don't feel it, we feel like those loose threads that are not connected to the tapestry of life. And if we don't feel connected to others, then we drift away and we become disengaged and disillusioned and often very destructive. This is important for every one of us, is to find our purpose. And here's the thing. Every thread matters, including, especially, yours. Because when you tie your purpose to others, everything changes for everyone. Not just for you. Everything changes. So it's important for you to go looking for the meaning of your life. But how do you find your purpose? How do you find purpose? This is the question. And the truth of the matter is that most people are looking for purpose in the place that it isn't. Put your hand up. And remember, only if I can't see armpits, it doesn't count. Put your hand up if you wear glasses. There's a lot of it. Keep your hand up. Now, you can only put your hand down if you've never lost your glasses while they've been on top of your head. How many of you have gone looking for your glasses while they're on top of your head? What is wrong with you people? I thought this was called military intelligence. What is going on? Of course you have. And you've looked everywhere for your glasses and they are right there. This is what it is with purpose. We go looking for it where it isn't. You see, there's this misnomer that the way you find your purpose is you look at what makes you happy. Your purpose will not be found in what makes you happy. What makes you happy is what you get. What makes you fulfilled is what you give. Your purpose is not on the surface. It never was. And the purpose has been with you from the beginning to the end. It will always be with you. It's never gone away. Your happiness is found in what you get, but your fulfillment is in what you give. And the reason you can't find your purpose if you're looking for it is because you're looking in the wrong place. What I mean by that is this. It may surprise you to know that your purpose is intricately woven into your pain. See, when I hit that hard reset of depression and all those dark, horrible things, that was bringing me back to my purpose. It was bringing me home to my one red thread, to find that within myself, to serve from that place. This is the question for you. Where are you hiding? What is it that your pain might be trying to wake you up to? What does your mind want to keep pushing away that your soul keeps calling back to you? What is the great awakening that waits for you? Let's go back to our examples for a moment. When we think of Malala Yousafzai, she was born in the Swat Valley of Pakistan, a place where girls are not particularly celebrated, where girls are expected to marry young and have children. And it was Malala's pain of seeing girls not having the opportunity to have an education that's created a global movement. It pained her to see that. She's gone on because her purpose is to champion every girl's right to a quality education. And she's created a foundation that's allowing girls around the world to have 12 years of free, safe, quality education. It's the pain that catalyzed that. Gary Vaynerchuk was born in the former Soviet Union. Gary was born in the former Soviet Union. As a young kid, he saw people that he loved, his family members, imprisoned, ridiculed, isolated because of their religious beliefs, because of their faith, because of the choices they want to make. And I believe that it was Gary's pain of seeing that and coming to America with his family and being very poor, very ordinary. It's the pain that has catalyzed him to be entrepreneurially driven and to serve others. And something you might want to know about Gary, his legacy, his purpose is to create a legacy of kindness. Not what you think from a hustler. So why does this work? Why is it that these two people, when you think about them, they've created this fiercely loyal following, and they, when you look at them and you see interviews with them, they're incredibly fulfilled individuals. So why does that work? Why does purpose plus impact create a fiercely loyal following that leaves us fulfilled? And the answer is because human beings are tribal. We are tribal. We want to belong. You've heard the other speakers speak about this. We want to belong. And when you share your purpose with another, it inspires them to find their purpose. And because we want to belong, belonging to a purpose-driven tribe gives us collective meaning. It allows us to know that we're part of something greater. And this is why you need to find your purpose and share your purpose. That's how you make the difference. Purpose plus impact creates fulfillment. So, as I finish up here, what I want to remind you of is this. In those moments where you're wondering, why am I going through this? Even if that's only in your own mind, why am I going through this? I want to challenge you to consider that maybe that's your one red thread, your purpose, trying to reveal itself to you. And just like the rock that must be pushed against the wheel to reveal the diamond within, life will push you against the wheel to throw off the false beliefs and reveal the diamond inside that is your purpose. That is why you're here. But no matter what's going on, no matter what the circumstances are, what I want you to remember is this. You were born whole, complete, and magnificently perfect. There was nothing missing. Nothing ever has been missing. And no one can take that away from you. You are already whole. So as I finish up, I want to get everybody to stand for a moment because I want you to ask the person next to you a question. Attention, please. Attention. I want you to turn to anybody who's close to you, and I want you to ask them this question. Who will suffer if you don't bother to look for your purpose? Go ahead. Now you've been asked that question, you will have to answer it for yourself. Who will suffer if you refuse to look for your purpose, if you don't go looking for your one red thread? Who will suffer if you don't claim the deep greatness that is embodied in your purpose? Every one of you matters. Every single thread matters. And I am honored to have been here to have served you who serve. I thank you for your time, your energy, your focus. Thank you all so much. Remember, you're already whole and complete.
All right, I'm still taking notes. so if you did take notes, give me a dilly-dilly. Dilly-dilly. If you think we met the mark of the purpose of today, which is building the leader in you, give me a hell yeah. Yeah. All right, so one last big round for our Grateful Eight. We got a couple that actually had to go back to work and things like that, but please stand if you're one of our Grateful Eight. Let's recognize them one more time here. All right, a couple last things about your book. If you look in the last couple pages there, if you want to have and continue the relationship with these amazing people, an online relationship, not in a creepy way, but in a professional way, all right? Go ahead, turn to the back. You'll see all of their social media. There's content on every single one of them out there. Google them, right? When you're done Googling yourself. And then the very last page, if I can get all of the Lift team, you'll see everybody listed. But that's not all the team on the back cover there. We have a lot of agencies that probably did a favor of this team. So everybody that had any small part in this, please stand and be recognized. Thank you. All right, thank you, Lift team. And lastly, I know it's lunchtime, but I'm going to try this. I keep screwing this up every time I get on stage and the boss leaves it up to me. So we're going to do the chant. All right, see how I'm kind of prepping you because I'm trying to get ready for this? All right, so I'm going to give you two key phrases, and I know what you all to say, all right? Team Fairchild, aim high. All right, have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming.